Thomson to open the debate. Around 7 minutes. Ms Thomson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I say thank you to colleagues who stayed for this debate as well, at an untypical time after decision time on a Thursday. So on to the serious matters, and Presiding Officer, let me start by saying, if you've been raped in Afghanistan, don't report it. You'll be accused of adultery and face public flogging or even stoning to death. If you're a woman or a young girl and need the protection of international human rights, don't live in Afghanistan, where every right has been trashed. If you're a girl over the age of 13, you are now denied the right to a school or university education. And if you're a women's rights activist, you face the wrath of the Taliban. According to Genocide Today, in their publication of December 2023, and I quote, "The Taliban have arrested many women's rights activists, such as Julia Parzi. These women were in the front lines fighting against inequalities. Today, they are tortured and raped by the Taliban." Tortured and raped for daring to promote the rights of women. So it is for the Julia Parzis and the oppressed women of Afghanistan that I dedicate this speech. Now, members of this Parliament will know I frequently raise concerns about the rights and needs of women in Scotland. But we cannot just believe in the rights of women at home. International human rights cannot just be for the affluent West. Now, I cannot claim first-hand knowledge of what life for the women of Afghanistan is like. But I know they need their voice to be heard and acted upon. And I know the international community has not stood with the women of Afghanistan as they should. So let me remind members of the context. I give thanks to David Lloyd-Webber, the UK Managing Director of the Human Emergency Response NGO Emergency, for much of the following detail. Afghanistan's been affected by violent conflict for over 40 years. Since the 2021 Taliban's takeover, the humanitarian crisis has deepened, an inheritance of the long war, poverty and corruption. The already weak institutions have faced the impact of natural disasters, resulting in a fragile social fabric. International sanctions and the freeze of Afghanistan's international assets abroad have put an extreme strain on a country that relied on international aid for 75% of public finance prior to the latest Taliban takeover. It is the work of NGOs such as Emergency that are critical in the provision of health services for women and children. Despite the heroic efforts of many, by 2022, 10.8 million Afghans lacked access to basic primary healthcare services. As of October 2022, 4.7 million children and pregnant and lactating women were estimated to be at risk of acute malnutrition. For women, being separated, widowed or divorced are linked to a decreasing ability to access care because of Taliban rule. Now, amidst this situation, imagine you are a young girl or woman. You're now denied the right to attend school or university, denied the right to work in most sectors of the economy and society. But those few areas you are allowed to work in, such as healthcare, you can no longer be given the educational opportunities to realistically aspire to become a nurse, a doctor or any profession allied to the health sector. Nor, since more recent decrees, are you allowed to work in the wider NGO sector that provides critical support for women and children. If you need to travel any distance from home, you're expected to be accompanied by a mahram, a male chaperone. If you do venture from your home alone and unaccompanied, you run the risk of being harassed or beaten by the Taliban's so-called morality police. Since the takeover, they've introduced not one, but 50 decrees that directly curtail the rights and dignity of women. This is a systematic attack on the rights of every girl and woman. And as a United Nations report pointed out earlier this year, and I quote, "The Taliban's vision for Afghanistan is founded on a structural denial of women's rights, well-being and personhood." Samira Hamidi, an Afghan activist at Amnesty International, has pointed out, In the past 2.5 years, the Taliban has dismantled institutions that were providing services to Afghan women. Last year, the Taliban's deputy in the Supreme Court said that the court has issued 37 sentences of stoning and 4 people were buried alive in a wall. But the situation is getting worse with further growth of violence against women. Habibullah Akhundzada, the Taliban's supreme leader, in setting out the ways women can be punished, in an audio message broadcast on March 24th of this year, stated, "We will flog the women. We will stone them to death in public." What a flagrant violation of international human rights laws, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. As Safia Arefi, head of Afghan human rights organisation Women's Window of Hope, said, "With this announcement by the Taliban leader, a new chapter of private punishments has begun." She went on to say, "Now no one standing beside them can save them from Taliban punishments. The international community has chosen to remain silent in the face of these violations of women's rights. I will not remain silent. I ask this Parliament not to do so either." Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Thompson.